My uncle Victor grabbed the merger documents from my hands during the board meeting and ripped them in half. He said I was trying to destroy 40 years of family legacy with my ridiculous idea. The other executives sat in silence while heckled me a disgrace to the family name, someone who would never understand what it takes to run a real business. He said my father made a mistake grooming me for leadership, that I was too soft, too different, too wrong for this world. I had spent 3 years restructuring our struggling divisions, working weekends while everyone else played golf, missing holidays to close deals that kept us afloat. But none of that mattered to him. What mattered was that I would never be the man he thought should lead this company. He looked at me with pure contempt and told the board that as acting CEO, he was removing me from all strategic projects. Then he asked if anyone disagreed. No one said a word. Was this really how my family saw me? As nothing more than a disappointment who didn't deserve a seat at the table. I joined the family business right after finishing my MBA, believing my education and dedication would prove my worth. My Uncle Victor controlled operations while my father's health declined, and he made it clear from day one that he saw me as a temporary problem, not a solution. During my first presentation to the board, he interrupted me to ask if I was sure I understood how real business worked, saying maybe I should stick to easier tasks. The room went silent, and I felt my face burn with shame. One detail. If you have ever felt judged just for being who you are, or know someone who has gone through this, the story will touch you, and you will want to follow it to the end. Subscribe and help give voice to stories that should no longer remain silent. My name is Cameron, and I grew up in Vancouver knowing I would someday work at Harrington Industries, the manufacturing company my grandfather built from nothing in the 1960s. We produced precision components for aerospace and automotive clients across North America. My father Richard was CEO for 20 years before his heart condition forced him to step back. That was when my uncle Victor, his younger brother, took control as acting CEO. I finished my MBA at McGill and returned home ready to prove myself worthy of the family legacy. My father always believed in me, but Victor made it clear he saw things differently. On my first day, he assigned me to the smallest division with worst performance metrics, telling the management team that I needed to learn humility before I could dream of real responsibility. The other executives nodded along. Most of them had worked with Victor for decades and knew better than to challenge him. Every morning, I arrived at the office by 7, reviewing production reports and client feedback while the building was still empty. I reorganized our supply chain relationship, cutting costs by 18% in my division within 6 months. I stayed late every night, sometimes working until midnight to finalize contracts or resolve production delays. My assistant Jennifer, one of the few people who treated me with genuine respect, often brought me coffee and told me to go home. But I knew that going home meant facing the emptiness of my apartment, the loneliness that came from hiding who I really was. My family never discussed my personal life. They never asked about relationships or what I did on weekends. There was an unspoken agreement that certain topics stayed buried. The microaggressions started small. During meetings, Victor would refer to other executives by their titles but call me just Cameron, never acknowledging my position as Vice President of Operations. He made jokes about my attention to detail, saying I was too meticulous, too concerned with things that didn't matter. When I suggested updating our outdated software systems, he laughed and said maybe I should focus on understanding how things actually worked before trying to change everything. Other executives followed his lead, dismissing my ideas before I finished presenting them. I learned to stay quiet unless directly asked a question, swallowing my frustration and pretending their disrespect didn't cut deep. But it did. Every dismissive comment, every condescending look, every time they talked over me as if I wasn't there, it reinforced the feeling that I would never be good enough for them. I met Ethan at a conference in Toronto about sustainable manufacturing practices. He worked for a European consulting firm specializing in corporate restructuring. We started talking during a networking dinner, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the possibility of being seen as myself rather than as the disappointing heir everyone picked. He was confident and direct, asking questions about my work that showed genuine interest. We exchanged numbers and started messaging every day. Within weeks, he visited Vancouver, and we spent a weekend exploring the city, talking about everything except my family and their expectations. For the first time, I let myself imagine a life where I didn't have to hide or apologize for existing. Ethan knew about my situation. He understood the pressure of family businesses and the weight of legacy. He never pushed me to come out or change anything. He just accepted me exactly as I was. Back at work, the pressure intensified. Our largest automotive client, a company that represented 30% of our annual revenue, was threatening to switch suppliers due to quality concerns. Victor blamed my division even though the problems originated in manufacturing processes I didn't control. During a heated board meeting, he stood up and pointed at me, saying this was exactly why the family couldn't trust me with real responsibility. He said I was careless and unprofessional, unable to handle the basics of client management. I tried to explain that the quality issues stemmed from outdated equipment that needed replacement, equipment I had requested budget for months earlier. But he cut me off, saying I was making excuses instead of taking accountability. The other board members looked uncomfortable but said nothing. My father, sitting quietly in the corner due to his health, closed his eyes, and I knew he felt powerless to defend me. I worked frantically to save the client relationship, flying to their headquarters in Michigan to meet with their procurement team. I presented a comprehensive quality improvement plan with specific timelines and investments. They were impressed with my thoroughness and agreed to give us one more chance. When I returned to Vancouver with the signed extension, I expected at least some recognition. Instead, Victor told the board that he had personally salvaged the relationship through his connections, barely mentioning my involvement. That was when I realized he would never give me credit for anything. In his mind, I would always be the inadequate nephew who needed to be controlled and diminished. The more I succeeded, the more threatened he felt, and the harder he worked to undermine me. Jennifer told me quietly one afternoon that people in the office talked about me behind my back. They speculated about why I never mentioned girlfriends or joined them for social events. Some made cruel jokes about my clothes or the way I spoke, imitating my voice in the break room when they thought no one was listening. She apologized for telling me, but felt I deserved to know what I was dealing with. I thanked her and went back to work, pretending her words didn't make me want to disappear. But they did. Every day became a performance, monitoring my gestures and word choices, trying to seem normal enough to avoid their mockery while knowing I would never truly belong. Ethan visited again 2 months later and stayed at my apartment. We cooked dinner together and talked about his latest projects in London and Berlin. He mentioned his firm was exploring opportunities in North America and asked about the Canadian manufacturing sector. I shared my frustrations about Harrington Industries, how capable we could be if we modernized our approach and stopped clinging to outdated methods. He listened carefully and said something that stuck with me. He said sometimes the only way to change a broken system was to break it completely and rebuild from scratch. I didn't understand what he meant then, but his words stayed in my mind as I returned to the daily grind of fighting for respect I will never receive. My father's health deteriorated and he officially resigned from the board, leaving Victor in complete control. The announcement came during a company-wide meeting where Victor presented himself as the steady hand guiding us through transition. He made a speech about family values and tradition, emphasizing his 40 years of experience and commitment to excellence. He never mentioned me once. After the meeting, I found my father in his office packing personal items. He looked tired and defeated. He told me he was sorry, that he had hoped things would be different, that he always believed I had what it took to lead this company. But his apology couldn't change reality. Victor now controlled everything, and I was completely expendable, just waiting for him to find the right moment to push me out entirely. The opportunity came from an unexpected direction. Ethan called me late one evening and said his firm had been approached by a major European automotive manufacturer looking to establish North American production facilities. They needed a partner with existing infrastructure and expertise, someone who could handle complex integration and meet aggressive quality standards. The contract value exceeded $800 million over 5 years. Ethan said his firm was evaluating potential partners and Harrington Industries was on the list, but only if we could demonstrate serious commitment to modernization and operational excellence. He wanted to know if I would be interested in leading the proposal development. This was the kind of transformative deal that could secure our future for decades, exactly what we needed to break free from our stagnant trajectory. I said yes immediately. I worked on the proposal for 3 weeks, often until 3 or 4 in the morning. I analyzed every aspect of our operations, identifying gaps and developing detailed plans for closing them. I researched the European company exhaustively, understanding their culture and priorities, tailoring our approach to match their expectations. Jennifer helped me coordinate site visits and prepare presentation materials. I knew this was my chance to prove my worth beyond any doubt, to show that I understood this business better than anyone gave me credit for. The proposal was exceptional, comprehensive, and innovative, addressing every concern while demonstrating clear competitive advantages. When I finally had a complete draft, I scheduled a meeting with Victor to present it. His reaction was worse than I imagined. He barely looked at the documents before pushing them back across his desk. He said I was wasting time chasing fantasies instead of focusing on core business. I explained the strategic importance of this partnership, how it would position us for long-term growth and stability. He interrupted, saying I clearly didn't understand the risks involved in such aggressive expansion. He said this wasn't some academic exercise where theory mattered more than reality. He said real business required instincts and experience I simply didn't possess. I felt my frustration rising, but kept my voice calm, pointing out our recent revenue declines and client losses, arguing we needed bold moves to survive. He stood up, leaning over his desk, and told me to stop pretending I knew anything about running a company. Then came the part that hurt most. He said the board would never approve a major strategic initiative led by someone like me, someone who didn't inspire confidence or respect. He said clients wanted to work with strong leaders, people who represented stability and traditional values. He never said the word gay, but his meaning was crystal clear. I wasn't the right kind of person to lead this company into important partners. My identity, my difference, my failure to fit their narrow definition of leadership disqualified me from opportunities I had earned through competence and dedication. I left his office feeling hollow, carrying my rejected proposal back to my desk while colleagues avoided eye contact. Word spread quickly that Victor had shut down my project, and I could sense their satisfaction, their relief that I had been put back in my place. I called Ethan that night and told him what happened. He was quiet for a long moment before saying something unexpected. He said his firm made the final partner recommendations, and they believed I was the right person to lead this project regardless of what Victor thought. He said the European client specifically wanted innovative leadership and weren't interested in working with rigid, outdated management. He asked if I would be willing to present directly to their executive team when they visited Vancouver next month. I was shocked. This would mean going around Victor completely, presenting myself as the face of Harrington Industries without his approval or knowledge. Ethan said the decision was mine, but his firm believed in me, and so did their client. I agreed, knowing this was either the biggest opportunity of my career or the end of everything. I spent the next month preparing obsessively. I refined every detail of the proposal, anticipating questions and developing backup plans. I coordinated with department heads secretly, explaining this was a confidential strategic initiative that required discretion. Most cooperated, perhaps sensing that change was inevitable or simply wanting to hedge their bets. Jennifer became my closest ally, managing schedules and communications while keeping Victor unaware of what was happening. The European executive team arrived on a Tuesday morning. I met them at their hotel and spent the entire day presenting our capabilities, walking them through our facilities, answering their technical questions with precision. They were impressed, particularly with my understanding of their business and my vision for integration. Their CEO, a woman named Christina, told me directly that I reminded her of herself years earlier, fighting to prove competence in environments that questioned her legitimacy. She said she believed in backing people who earned respect through performance rather than politics. By the end of their visit, they indicated strong interest in moving forward, but with one condition. They wanted me personally to serve as their primary liaison and project director. They didn't trust Victor's leadership style and found his resistance to modernization concerning. This put me in an impossible position. If I agreed, Victor would see it as betrayal and move to destroy me. If I refused, I would lose this transformative opportunity. Christina gave me a week to decide. I spent those days weighing my options, talking with Ethan about the risks and possibilities. He reminded me that sometimes you had to choose between pleasing people who would never accept you and pursuing what you knew was right. My father, when I visited him at home, looked at me with sad eyes and said he wished he had been stronger, that he had protected me better. But he also said I had to make my own choice, live with whatever consequences came. I accepted Christina's terms and informed Victor the following Monday. I walked into his office and told him the European company wanted to partner with Harrington Industries, but required me as the project lead. His face turned red, and he started yelling, calling me a snake who had gone behind his back, accusing me of trying to stage some kind of coup. I stayed calm, explaining this was a legitimate business opportunity that would benefit everyone. He said I had no authority to negotiate anything, and he would kill this deal before letting me take credit. I told him the decision wasn't his anymore, that the board would have to vote on accepting or rejecting an $800 million partnership. He threatened to expose what he called my agenda, my attempt to push the company toward radical changes that would destroy everything his brother built. His words dripped with contempt, and I knew he was talking about more than business strategy. He was talking about me, about who I was, about everything he found wrong and unacceptable. The emergency board meeting happened 2 days later. Victor presented his case against the partnership, calling it risky and poorly conceived, claiming I had manipulated foreign executives who didn't understand our business. I presented the actual proposal with detailed financial projections and risk mitigation strategies. The board members looked uncomfortable, caught between Victor's emotional appeals and undeniable numbers showing this could save the company. My father wasn't there, too ill to attend. After 3 hours of debate, they voted to move forward with preliminary negotiations, but insisted Victor remain involved in all decisions. It was a compromise that satisfied no one. Victor glared at me across the table, and I knew he would make him pay for this humiliation. The other executives avoided me afterward, unwilling to pick sides publicly, but clearly uncomfortable with the conflict. The sabotage started immediately. Victor blocked my access to key financial data I needed for negotiations. He told department heads not to cooperate with my requests, claiming everything had to go through him first. He scheduled conflicting meetings during my calls with the European team, forcing me to choose between internal and external commitments. He spread rumors that I was in over my head, that the deal would collapse because I lacked the experience to manage complex negotiations. Several board members started questioning whether I was the right person for this role, suggesting maybe Victor should take over the relationship. I worked twice as hard to compensate, staying connected with Christina's team through evenings, preparing materials on weekends, proving through constant availability that I could deliver despite the obstacles. Ethan visited during this period and saw how exhausted I was, how the pressure was grinding me down. He held me while I finally let myself cry, releasing months of accumulated pain and frustration. The next 3 months were brutal. I traveled between Vancouver, Toronto, and Frankfurt, meeting with technical teams and legal advisors, hammering out contract details. I missed my father's birthday because I was presenting integration plans in Germany. I canceled weekend plans with Ethan repeatedly because crises demanded immediate attention. My relationship started showing strain. He understood the pressure but pointed out that I was sacrificing everything, my health and my personal life and my happiness, for a company that treated me like garbage. I told him I had to see this through, that I couldn't let Victor win. That proving myself was the only thing that mattered anymore. He looked at me with concern and said I was losing sight of why I started fighting in the first place. But I couldn't stop. Stopping meant admitting defeat. Victor escalated his campaign against me. During a board meeting, he presented allegations that I had violated company protocols by conducting unauthorized negotiations. He claimed I had made commitments beyond my authority and potentially posed the company to legal liability. It was nonsense. Every step I took was documented and approved, but his accusations created doubt. The board demanded a full review of my communications and decisions. I provided everything they requested, dozens of documents and emails and meeting notes, proving I had followed proper procedures throughout. The review cleared me of wrongdoing, but the damage was done. Some board members now question my judgment and wondered if Victor was right about my inexperience. I felt the walls closing in, the realization that no amount of competence or dedication would overcome their fundamental discomfort with who I was. The breakthrough came during a negotiation session in Frankfurt. Christina pulled me aside after a long day and asked if I was okay. I tried to deflect, saying everything was fine, just normal business stress. She said she had worked with hundreds of executives over her career and could recognize when someone was being systematically undermined. She asked directly if my company was sabotaging this deal because of internal politics. I hesitated, then told her the truth. I explained Victor's resistance, the board's ambivalence, the constant obstacles I faced despite delivering results. I told her about the whispers and the subtle mockery and the feeling of being tolerated rather than respected. I didn't explicitly say I was gay, but she understood. She nodded slowly and said she had seen this pattern before. Talented people held back by organizations that valued conformity over performance. Then she made an offer that changed everything. She said her company was committed to this partnership, but not necessarily with Harrington Industries. She said if I were willing to establish an independent consulting firm, they would contract directly with me to manage the implementation and ongoing operations. The financial terms would be comparable to what Harrington Industries would receive, except I would control everything. She said they trusted me specifically, not the company, and were willing to restructure the arrangement to work with me as the primary partner. I was stunned. This would mean leaving my family's company, walking away from the legacy I had fought so hard to claim. But it would also mean freedom from Victor's constant sabotage and the board's conditional acceptance. Christina gave me 2 weeks to decide. I flew home to Vancouver and immediately called. He listened to the offer and then asked what I really wanted. Not what I thought I should want, not what would please my father or prove something to Victor, but what would actually make me happy. I realized I didn't know anymore. I had spent so long fighting for acceptance that I forgot to question whether the fight was worth winning. He reminded me that building something new was always scarier than fixing something broken, but it was also the only way to create something truly mine. We talked through the night about possibilities and risks. By morning, I knew what I had to do. The confrontation happened in the boardroom. I requested an emergency meeting and presented Christina's alternative proposal. I explained that the European company was offering to partner with me independently if I left Harrington Industries. Victor exploded, calling me a traitor who was stealing company opportunities, threatening legal action for breach of contract and theft of proprietary relationship. I responded calmly, noting that I had developed this relationship independentizing my own time and expertise, that Harrington Industries had repeatedly rejected and obstructed the initiative. The board members looked shocked, uncertain how to process this dramatic turn. My presentation included full documentation of Victor's sabotage, emails where he explicitly instructed staff not to cooperate with my efforts, meeting notes showing his attempts to undermine negotiations. I laid out everything cleanly and factually, letting the evidence speak for itself. Then came Victor's ugliest moment. He stood up, shaking with rage, and said the real reason I was doing this was because I couldn't handle being part of a real family business. He said I had always been different, always been wrong, and that everyone knew I didn't belong in this environment. He said some things were more important than profit margins, that companies had values and standards and traditions worth protecting. He said letting someone like me represent Harrington Industries would be a disgrace to everything his family had built. The room went completely silent. Every board member stared at him, shocked by his explicit bigotry. I felt something break inside me, not from pain, but from clarity. This man, who had controlled my professional life for years, was exactly what I thought he was, and I was done pretending his opinion mattered. I told the board they had a choice to make. They could continue following Victor's leadership and lose this transformative opportunity, or they could recognize that their acting CEO had just admitted his decisions were based on personal prejudice rather than business judgment. I said I was leaving regardless, taking the partnership with me, but I wanted them to understand exactly why their company was failing. It wasn't because of market conditions or competitive pressures. It was because they promoted small-minded bigots who drove away talent and opportunity to protect their fragile ego. I gathered my materials and walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. It felt like shedding a weight I had carried my entire life. I went home and called my father. I told him everything, including what Victor said, including my decision to leave. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said he was proud of me, that I had shown more courage and integrity than he ever managed. He said he was sorry for not protecting me better, for allowing Victor's poison to spread unchecked. He said I was building something better than Harrington Industries ever was, and he believed I would succeed. That conversation healed something in me, the need for my father's approval that had driven so many of my choices. Ethan arrived that evening and held me while I processed everything. He said he was proud, too, that leaving was the hardest and bravest option, that starting over took more strength than enduring. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I established Harrington Consulting within 2 weeks, registering the company and securing initial financing through Ethan's connections. Christina's company became my anchor client with the $800 million contract signed under my new firm's name. I hired Jennifer as my operations director and recruited several talented engineers who had grown frustrated with Harrington Industries' outdated management. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was building exactly what I had tried to create within my family's company, except now I controlled every decision and answered only to clients and myself. The first month was chaos, establishing systems and processes while delivering on aggressive timelines. But it was exhilarating chaos, the kind that came from building something rather than fighting against constant resistance. The fallout at Harrington Industries was swift and brutal. Without the European partnership, their financial situation deteriorated rapidly. Several other clients, hearing about the management turmoil and my departure, started exploring alternative suppliers. The board launched an investigation into Victor's conduct during the negotiations. What they found was damning. Email records showed he had actively sabotaged my efforts from the beginning, not because he thought the deal was bad for the company, but because he couldn't tolerate the idea of my success. He had lied to the board about my performance, suppressed positive client feedback, and deliberately misrepresented financial projections to make my initiatives look risky. The investigation report included his exact words from multiple communications, making clear that his opposition was rooted in personal bigotry rather than business judgment. 3 board members resigned in protest of Victor's conduct. My father, despite his illness, submitted testimony supporting the findings and calling for Victor's immediate removal. The local business press got hold of the story, and it became a scandal. Articles detailed how a family manufacturing company had driven away a transformative opportunity through discriminatory leadership. Industry analysts discussed Harrington Industries as a cautionary tale about the costs of outdated management culture. Victor tried to defend himself, claiming he was protecting company interests, but his own documented words condemned him. The board voted to remove him as CEO and terminate his employment. He threatened lawsuits, but his lawyers eventually convinced him that discovery would only expose more damaging evidence. He left quietly, his reputation destroyed, his 40-year career ending in public disgrace. But the damage was done. Harrington Industries lost two more major clients within months. Their stock price collapsed. Several key executives jumped ship to competitors. The board approached me quietly, asking if I would consider returning to save the company. I declined. I told them I was building something new and had no interest in rescuing an organization that had tolerated and enabled Victor's behavior for years. They asked if I would at least consider a consulting arrangement or partnership. I said no, some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. My father understood. He told me he was planning to sell his remaining shares and step away entirely, that the company he helped build no longer represented values he could support. That conversation brought closure, the recognition that leaving wasn't abandonment, but necessary evolution. My firm thrived. We secured 3 additional major contracts within 6 months, each building on our reputation for innovative problem solving and operational excellence. I hired aggressively, seeking talented people who had been overlooked or undervalued in traditional corporate environments. My team included women who had hit glass ceilings, immigrants whose credentials were dismissed, LGBTQ professionals who had faced subtle discrimination, anyone whose competence exceeded their opportunities. We built a culture of radical meritocracy where performance mattered and identity didn't constrain possibility. Ethan joined my firm as a strategic advisor, bringing his European connections and expertise. Our professional partnership strengthened our personal relationship, allowing us to build both a business and a life together. The most satisfying moment came 9 months after I left. Harrington Industries filed for bankruptcy protection, unable to service debt or satisfy remaining clients. The business press covered it extensively, tracing the decline to management failures and strategic missteps. Several articles specifically mentioned Victor's role in driving away key talent and opportunities. Some reporters reached out for my comments. I declined interviews, letting the facts speak for themselves. Vindication didn't require my voice. The company's collapse proved everything I had tried to tell them years earlier. My father called the day the bankruptcy filing was announced. He said watching the company fail was painful, but watching me succeed was healing, that sometimes you had to let broken things die so new growth could emerge. Victor tried to contact me once, leaving a voicemail that oscillated between self-pity and blame. He said I had destroyed his life's work through and betrayal. He said I had poisoned the board against him and manipulated situations to serve my agenda. He said he hoped I was satisfied with the damage I caused. I deleted the message without responding. His version of reality, where he was the victim and I was the villain, was so divorced from truth that engaging with it would be pointless. Some people never develop the capacity for self-reflection or accountability. Victor was one of them. His downfall wasn't my revenge. It was the inevitable consequence of building a career on prejudice and obstruction rather than competence and collaboration. The bankruptcy trustee contacted me about acquiring certain Harrington Industries assets. Several of our key manufacturing facilities and client relationships were being liquidated. I considered it briefly but decided against involvement. I didn't need their infrastructure anymore. I had built my own. Letting the company die completely felt like the cleanest ending, the final severing of ties to an institution that had caused so much unnecessary pain. Other companies acquired the pieces, dividing what remained of Harrington Industries among competitors who saw bargain opportunity. Within 18 months, the name Harrington Industries disappeared entirely from the business landscape, absorbed and erased as if it had never existed. My firm celebrated its 2nd anniversary with revenues exceeding $120 million and a client roster spanning 3 continents. I stood in our modern Vancouver office, surrounded by the team I had built, and felt something I hadn't felt working at my family's company: pure pride uncontaminated by shame or the need to prove anything. Ethan stood beside me during the celebration and squeezed my hand. No one in the room cared or commented. That casual acceptance, the ability to exist fully without performance or apology, represented everything I had fought to achieve. Success wasn't just financial metrics or business growth. Success was being able to hold my partner's hand in my own office without fear or hesitation, building a company where everyone could do the same. Looking back, I understand that leaving Harrington Industries wasn't failure, but liberation. I had spent years trying to earn acceptance from people who would never offer it, proving competence to those who had already decided I was inadequate. The hardest thing I ever did was walk away from the legacy I thought defined my worth. But walking away allowed me to build something better, something mine, something that reflected my values rather than accommodating their prejudice. Victor's downfall wasn't revenge, it was consequence. He spent his career elevating loyalty over competence, tradition over innovation, conformity over performance. Those choices eventually destroyed what he claimed to protect. I didn't defeat him. He defeated himself. The cost was real. I sacrificed the family connection I always wanted, accepted that some relationships couldn't survive honesty, learned that authenticity sometimes means choosing loneliness over belonging. But the cost of staying would have been higher. I would have spent my life diminished, accepting scraps of recognition while performing acceptability for people who would never see my full humanity. Some prices are too high to pay, even for legacy. Especially for legacy. Building my own company taught me that creating something new beats fixing something broken, that the courage to leave matters more than the endurance to stay. To anyone facing similar battles, understand this. Your worth don't depend on convincing prejudiced people to value you. Your talent doesn't require validation from those who choose not to see it. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop fighting for acceptance and start building your own path. It's terrifying and lonely and exhausting. But on the other side of that fear is freedom, the ability to exist fully without apology or performance. That freedom is worth every sacrifice. If my story inspired you, if you have ever felt diminished or know someone who has, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, we share real stories of overcoming and resistance. And if you have your own story of triumph against prejudice, share it in the comments. Your experience can inspire someone going through a similar situation. Remember, your value is not defined by others' prejudice. Your talent is greater than any barrier they try to put in your way. And sometimes the best revenge is simply being who you are without apologizing. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story, which will be even more impactful.